So yesterday, I unloaded on the budget like just about every other right-winger in America, right? You know, we all went a little bit nuts on this budget. And I wanted to step back for a minute because this is one of the problems with right-wing politics, is because right-wingers never think about the long game. Everything is always a crisis. Everything is always a disaster. We've always been betrayed. It's always we never step back and look at whether we're winning or losing the long game. You know, and the long game is all important because the long game is what the left plays so brilliantly well. The long game is the culture. The long game is the academy. The long game is the news media, all the things that shape public opinion, because as our founders knew, no law stands up, bless you, no law stands up against, I hope you have life insurance, and I hope I'm the beneficiary. No law stands up against public opinion. If public opinion turns against free speech, the First Amendment isn't going to help you one little bit, okay? So I just want to step back a little bit and look at this. Yesterday, the Trumpire struck back, basically. They started to defend their budget, and they said that they got rolled kind of by the Democrats in the press, not in the budget negotiations. So let's take a look at some of the things that they were talking about. First, let's take a look at what Rush Limbaugh had Mike Pence on, and it was a fair deal. Like, Rush really went out at him. He said, why should we vote for Republicans if this is all we're going to get? And here's one of their exchanges.
If I'm the Democrats, $21 billion, $15 billion for defense that was not originally authorized, that's a small price to pay for continuing to fund refugee resettlement, continuing to fund Planned Parenthood, continuing to fund sanctuary cities, continuing to fund the EPA and not build the wall. The Democrats clearly think this is a big win, and they're confident they can block Trump's agenda after this spending bill for the rest of Trump's term. There isn't anything of the president's agenda in this budget, and people are beginning to ask, when's that going to happen? If you're going to shut it down in September, why not now? Yeah. If you complain about 60 votes today, why not go budget reconciliation for 51 votes and smoke them?
Rush, Rush, let me be real clear. The number one priority of President Trump is to rebuild our military, to restore the arsenal of democracy. And I got to tell you, to get Democrats in Washington, D.C. to agree to a $21 billion increase in a short-term budget bill. And, you know, the president's calling for the largest increase in military spending since the Reagan administration in the upcoming budget, I think it's no small accomplishment. Also, this bill includes the largest increase in border security funding in 10 years.
Okay, so this is the important thing here, is that the deal on sequestration was that you couldn't, for every dime that you spent on the military, you had to spend money on social programs. And that was part of Obama's plan, A, to, overwhelm us with social programs, and B, to destroy our military, which he was doing an excellent job of. So they broke that. They broke the hold of that, and that's important. Trump also points out that even though he was talking before the Air Force Academy, and he points out that even though he didn't get money for the wall, he got a lot of money for increased border security. So here's the second Trump cut, Trump on the border.
We achieved the single largest increase in border security funding in 10 years. So we have more money now for the border than we've gotten in 10 years. So the Democrats didn't tell you that. They forgot. In their notes, they forgot to tell you that. With enough money to make a down payment on the border wall. I think they'll go back and check their papers. This includes swiftly replacing ineffective and failing fencing and walls with an unbreakable barrier. So we're putting up a lot of new walls in certain areas. We're putting up a tremendous amount of money to fix the existing structures that we have, some of which we can keep into the future. They're in good shape, but we have to bring them back to the highest level. We'll be doing that with this payment.
Okay, so that's, this is his chance to make his plea. Because what they're complaining about? What they're complaining about is they went down and they sat down and they had bipartisan negotiations. They needed the extra votes to pass this thing. And then the Democrats ran out and said, we win, we win, we win. And of course, whatever the Democrats say gets echoed by the press. So now they're all kind of feeling like they got a little bit stabbed in the back. But that's politics. I mean, that's the Democrats doing a good job at what they do. But According to the Wall Street Journal, which has been very good about this stuff, despite their claims, Democrats did not preserve funding for Planned Parenthood. Now, this is a big one because obviously I don't want my tax dollars going to these people. But the bill contains no direct dollars for that group, but rather funds grants that will be issued by Health and Human Services, which is now unlikely to approve any for Planned Parenthood. So that's a little bit different than we heard. It all depends now on where those grants go and what they're used for. Somebody asked me in the mailbag if they're not allowed to use the money for, even Planned Parenthood is not allowed to use the money for abortions, but that's ridiculous. Money is fungible. It doesn't matter whether you give it to Planned Parenthood, you give it to an abortion provider. It doesn't matter what they use it for. They're just shifting other money to the abortion, so it doesn't really matter. Most of the domestic funding increases and decreases are GOP priorities. The bill contains $45 million to fund 3 more years of Washington, D.C.'s popular school voucher program, as well as money for Western wildfire fighting and disaster-related repairs at NASA. Conversely, the bill zeroes out dollars to the International Green Climate Fund, set up as part of the Paris Climate Accord, and it rescinds, consolidates, or terminates more than 150 federal programs or initiatives, including such high priorities as the Christopher Columbus Fellowship, on and on. The important thing here, what the bill doesn't do. So in other words, it was a negotiation, right? The bill was almost finished by the time by the time Trump came in. It's a negotiation. But the important thing here is they've got to stop with these omnibus spending bills because nobody can read them. They used to be in 12 separate appropriation bills, and then you would negotiate, and you could really get into the weeds and lose on one appropriation bill and win on another. They've got to get back to that. And that is not up to Trump, obviously. That's up to Congress, but they really have to start talking about that. But, So again, a compromise, not what we want from these guys. We want them to drain the swamp. It's not draining the swamp. It's not changing the way Washington works. It's just supplying the money to it's business as usual, and that's not why Trump was elected. So it is a loss overall, but it's not a disaster. It's just a loss overall, and that is what, like I said, Trump has shown himself to be very good at the part of government that is like business, but not so good so far at the part of government that's like government, and hopefully he's going to pick that up, okay?